Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the R2-D2 to my C-3PO, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
This week we're talking about Wookies.
So Wookies, yes, we are delving back into Star Wars species. Wookies, if you haven't seen them for some reason, are a 2 meter tall, 7.5 foot tall, furry, it looks like a Sasquatch creature from the Star Wars universe, the most famous individual of which is Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm.
So they're big and they're tall and they're covered with fur and they've got claws. They don't tend to wear pants, I assume, because it's covered. Their junk is covered with fur.
God, can you imagine trying to wear pants with that much body hair? So much pinching and pulling.
Yeah. So they're interesting, I think, because we know a little bit about them from like the Star Wars extended like universe stuff, the legends information and things. We know, like, actually, although we might have seen it's been a long time since I saw the prequels, if we ever actually saw their home world of Kashyyyk with like 3 Ys.
I know they showed it in, I want to say either Clone Wars or, I think it was Clone Wars.
It's probably in Clone Wars. I haven't seen Clone Wars because I keep trying to start it and I can't get anywhere with it. I know it's supposed to be one of those ones that gets good, but like, that means I have to slog through that first season, and I've never made it. Anyway, we know some stuff about Wookiees, and specifically that they are an arboreal species. They live up in trees,
mm-hmm.
and they have like retractable claws, and they're covered in hair. And I don't know, man. Like, I feel like there's meat for us to screw around with these guys a little bit.
Sure.
They're so iconic, but yet in the mind of most people, we know so little of them. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they can understand common, or I think they call it common and
basic.
Basic, you're right. Common is D&D. Basic is Star Wars.
Yes.
So they can understand basic, but they can't speak it.
Mm-hmm.
So that says something about like their vocal cords or something like that. But they're obviously intelligent creatures, sentient, able to pilot and repair spaceships and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're also supposed to live hundreds of years. Like, they're supposed to be like a super long-lived species.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. Yeah. If anybody doesn't know this, they were originally supposed to be in Return of the Jedi. The Wookiees were going to take the role of the Ewoks. But this fact might be apocryphal. It was cheaper to hire little people than it was to hire tall people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they decided to go with Ewoks instead.
I see.
Yeah. That's a thing. Anyway,
yeah, that's an unfortunate.
And of course, we've all lost our reverence for George Lucas, who, when he made that decision, said, "Oh, what are we going to call them? Ewoks, Wookiees." Oh, well, yeah. I was like, I'll just take the word that I was going to use, Wookiee, and I'm just going to pull the end of it off and put it in the front, and that's it. We're just going to go with that. And otherwise keep everything else the same. There's still an arboreal species that lives in trees and like is furry and runs around a forest. Like it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Minimum possible effort is what that series was about.
Oh, let's go put some effort in.
Yeah, let's go put some effort in. We were talking before air. I am struck with some similarities between the Wookiees and Sloths.
Okay, I can see it.
The Wookiee fur, which is in the costumes, it's actually yak hair, but the Wookiee fur has that same sort of quality to it that sloth fur does.
Very wiry.
Yeah, kind of, and quite long and kind of lank, I guess is the way I'm thinking of it. Like, it kind of flows. Yeah. It doesn't have stiffness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, sloths have big old claws. They live in trees. They've got those long limbs. Like,
mm-hmm.
with the exception of the face, I think that the overall build of the Wookiee is actually quite sloth-like.
I can see it, yeah.
And then there was a time up to a couple thousand years ago, probably, when like big ground sloths were a thing. I mean, there was I forget what the megalonyx, I think, was like there was at least one that was like 2 stories tall. Like, it was as big as a giraffe.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved around the old forests of the Ice Age. So yeah, you can totally imagine a really big, like, sentient sloth as the basis for something like the Wookiee.
Well, to pile onto that, I kind of like the idea that maybe there's like a giant 2-story tall Wookiee.
Yeah. I know that when I was young, one of the things that was like, this seems weird, is that I was pointed out on a forum somewhere that like, oh, well, Chewbacca is like an adolescent. Somebody was like, that was a factoid that got thrown around at the time.
Interesting.
He's a very young Wookiee because Wookiees are supposed to live hundreds of years. So maybe he's only like half grown. Like maybe they get bigger.
I like that. They're gonna have to remodel the Millennium Falcon to fit him in a couple hundred years.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like. Let's roll with that.
Okay.
The adaptations that come from being a sloth work very well for making a mammal that lives in trees. For example, those big old claws are less about like tearing and ripping and being weapons, but they're really mostly about grabbing onto tree limbs and holding onto them. In fact, the way their ligaments are set up, they actually have to consciously open their hands. If they relax their hands, they close up and hook onto things. So it's a conscious effort for them to open their hands. So you can imagine that Wookiees might be the same way, that like they're like they have to constantly, they will always have their hands and feet kind of curled up a little bit.
They just got big old chip clips for hands.
Yep, exactly. Ooh, and you can imagine like the Millennium Falcon having a bunch of, instead of like Chewbacca walking around the ship, it has a bunch of like monkey bars and stuff around it. And he just like moves, like never touches the ground. He's just grabbing onto things as he moves through the ship. That's pretty cool.
I wonder, like in the Star Wars universe, like all the ships always seem to have artificial gravity. But like, what if they didn't? Like, I feel like this would be a species that would actually be very well adapted to moving around a ship with no gravity.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's really cool. In addition to that, the step I always want to take it is one further, which is when you do have artificial gravity, why is it always the entire ship is in the same orientation? Like, why couldn't you have a ship where the hull is always outward and you're always looking up to the outside of the ship, or that it's like built into like a banana shape and like the curves of the decks are across that banana shape or something? Like, surely there are more interesting ways to lay out your spaceship than like an apartment building.
Yeah, there's got to be like more practical ways. Like if you can just like generate like this is down.
Yeah.
Like for any particular point on a ship, like have fun with that. Like,
yeah, you know, instead of having an elevator which takes you up 2 stories or whatever, you walk into a tube and then for like you step into it and then your down is up for a little while. And so you float upward. And then you get to a section where that reverses and you start to decelerate, and you literally just kind of like walk into a tube and the gravity system just takes over. You don't need a housing around you or anything. It just like moves you through. Or like you step into a vertical hallway where like the stuff changes for a while and you walk up the wall of the hallway and then come out on the other. Like there's such cool stuff you could do with that.
I also just love the idea that maybe there's like issues with the gravity malfunction and like someone just walking along a flat surface and like part of the gravity generator shorts out and suddenly you're just slammed against the ceiling, shatter all your bones just walking down a simple hallway.
Yep. It's also that'd be a really good way to assassinate somebody too, like to rig the gravity system on the ship to like target them, like the room they're in or something like that, and just release like hundreds of G's all at once. Okay, back to what we were talking about, which is Wookiees. If we're gonna borrow from the Wookiees or borrow from the Sloths for the Wookiees, I think we need to look at the fun. I think we need to look at the fun sloth facts, like the fact that moss grows on them. If they're slow enough, like they will actually like get a plant material will grow on them and they'll turn green.
Interesting. Yeah.
They also only poop and pee once a week. They only excrete themselves once a week. They climb down from their trees in order to release all of their excrement in a single go, which apparently is like a third of their body weight. So, you know, I guess that's a bad day of the week on the Millennium Falcon when Chewbacca finally lets loose.
And I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
This is another pet peeve of mine. Spaceship designers never put a toilet in. Like you will sometimes. Okay, well, the Millennium Falcon may be special because Millennium Falcon like layouts never work. Like they always have like the floor plan and the outside model, and the two of them never match up well ever. So I guess that one gets a little bit of a pass because it can't possibly be true. But like on the like if you get the deck plans of the Star Trek USS Enterprise, and like there is a single toilet on the entire like 700 meter long spaceship.
Has a crew of 50, but
no. If I'm thinking of the Enterprise D, it's like a crew. It's 1,000 people with a single toilet. That is a bad time, unless they're using the transporters to get poop directly out of people's colons. Or they're pulling a J.K. Rowling where they're pooping on the floor and then transporting it away.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, didn't hear about that. J.K. Rowling says that in the time before, according to her Twitter account, of course, in the time before indoor plumbing at Hogwarts, the wizards used to just poop on the floor and then use their magic to whisk it away. This is apparently canon now for the Harry Potter universe, which is why I'm glad I pretty much missed the whole Harry Potter thing. Like, I did not read it when it was out. I read it later and then immediately read Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality and liked it better. So that's my version of it, which is still not good in a lot of ways, but it's at least better.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to poke holes in with Harry Potter. Maybe we can do that with our one of our episodes one time.
Yeah, the only trouble with that one is there's so few like monsters in it, like that actually show up for any amount of time. Like,
everything was Monster of the Week.
yeah, it's so flat. They show up for not even like a week. They show up for like a minute, you know? Like, there's the longest one maybe is the Basilisk. Gets a whole book where it's kind of hanging around, but we could just do a Basilisk episode. So anyway,
yeah,
I'm gonna have to cut all of that because as we just dunk on Harry Potter for a few minutes. So talking about, toilets, toilets on spaceships. Yeah. So, and I think obviously they can move, our sloth-like Wookiees can move at a good pace and they can keep track with humans. I think obviously Wookiee metabolism is such that they can speed up. Like, they're an infuriating companion to have if they can they're only ever going to move at sloth speed.
Oh yeah.
Something about them, they can ramp up and down on their metabolism.
I'm just picturing Dash from Zootopia replacing Chewbacca. Chewie, punch it. Okay. I appreciated the blue shift on that Wookiee noise there.
Yeah, so they obviously have the ability to move fast occasionally. Maybe that makes them, they're obviously they're too big to be a prey species, especially if they're arboreal. If they're like living up in the trees, there's not going to be anything bigger than them eating them. But if you look at Chewie's teeth, that dude is probably a predator. Maybe you could make the argument they do look a little bit like gorilla teeth, because gorillas have some fangs like that, and they're vegetarian. But I'm looking at Chewbacca. That says that maybe he occasionally eats some meat.
You don't get a phrase like "let the Wookiee win" without a Wookiee having eaten someone before.
Yeah, so maybe they are they have two modes. Where one is when they're sort of low on food. They haven't eaten in a little while. They're conserving all of their energy in order to have like one big burst of motion all at once.
Mm-hmm.
They will like subsist off of like leaves and bark and things like that. They can like just chew on the trees that they're living in and to sustain themselves. And then when something gets close enough, they can spring into action and become very active really quickly and start like swinging through the tree like a chimp style, and moving very quickly to track something down and tear it apart and eat it, which I think is suitably terrifying for it.
Yeah, I like that.
And then, so this is sort of like the biological basis for it. This is their chimp version, their Australopithecine version of the Wookiee. Because as they evolved into a more sentient species, it seems like they're maybe spending a bit more time in that fast mode as time goes on, because they develop things like tools where they can hunt more frequently and get more access to more calorie dense meats.
Yeah, they learned how to cook food.
Yep. And also, they build things, but they still have, I like the idea they still have access to that ability to slow their metabolism down and just become very slow and not use a lot of energy. I like that is also explains their long lifespan, that like maybe they don't, the natural lifespan of a Wookiee isn't measured in years. It's measured in like miles. Like it doesn't matter how quickly they get somewhere. It matters how much they move.
Interesting. I also like the idea, because they can kind of go into this dormant state. Like, I like the idea that maybe, and because they live so long, maybe their original modes of like hyperspace travel were just kind of like doing it like the long way.
Oh yeah. They were one of the few species that managed to travel to other worlds before they invented hyperspace, access to hyperspace. Yes, that is cool. Where they all just get into their ship and they set the autopilot, and then they all just slow down until they get to the next place, and they speed up and they're like, oh, this is fine. This is great. And everybody else is like, when like they make contact with a hyperspace capable species, they're like, you do what now? Like, yeah, that's perfect. this is something that bothers me a little bit. What would Wookiee ships be like? Because we see lots of human ships in the Star Wars universe, but like our versions of Wookiees would design spaceships very differently, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Just to start out with, they're definitely not made of wood. Like this isn't some like, they're not like the tribal spaceship, right? Like they're just, they develop their own advanced technologies that they apply their own design sensibilities to.
Okay.
So like maybe I love the idea that they don't care about gravity the way that we do. So like you mentioned earlier, that they put a bunch of handholds all over their ships, and then they just don't bother putting any or artificial gravity in. And they also maybe, because of that, might be a little bit less concerned about which way is up. Like their ships might not have everything in Star Wars is always designed with a very like clear sort of upside. Like, you know, the Star Destroyers are always depicted with their bridges on the upper half of the screen, and they're very obviously always meant to be shown in a certain orientation. And whenever they're in space, they all line up the same way. Like they never just like floating around in different configurations. And maybe that's a knock-on effect of everybody using artificial gravity, so they sort of orient themselves that way. Whereas when Wookiees build their ships, they're like, whatever. It looks like a cluster of, you know, tree trunks or something like that. It looks like cylinders that have been welded together or something.
I was thinking like if like they're trying to be efficient and whatever, and like their primary mode of transportation is like swinging from branch to branch. I feel like they're going to have like a lot of like arches for corridors and connecting things like that. So everything might be just kind of like these sweeping designs that are designed to like allow a Wookiee to traverse from one place to another with just like one swing, as opposed to like walking down a hallway.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. So these sort of like graceful curves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it looks kind of like a like I said, maybe like a big pine cone, maybe, or something like that, where instead of being a wedge like the Star Destroyers have, it's kind of conical and has like segments on it and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
That could be kind of cool. And yeah, their original version of it didn't even have hyperdrive. They just like fired themselves off and then went to sleep. And they weren't so concerned about like, well, will my family be there when I get back? Because like, no, they're fine. They're also going to live hundreds of years. They don't really care.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the bowcaster? The famous weapon that Chewbacca uses. He uses this big old crossbow thing.
Like from what I can tell, like it's basically just a blaster with a crossbow bar.
So supposedly in universe, it fires what he calls blaster bolts. And it like you actually have to cock that thing. Like the reason why Chewie is the only one who uses it is because he's the only one strong enough to go and like actually like shotgun it in order to load the next shell.
Which they toss out with the last three movies, but
actually no. He cocks it and then hands it to Han, apparently. Han only ever shoots it like once and then hands it back. And it's like, I like that thing. But also, I mean, there's lots of other problems with those movies, but there is an excuse for that one thing.
All right.
But I do like the idea of them having access to kinds of weapons that only their great strength would have.
Okay, yeah.
Would allow them access to. Like maybe a slightly more believable example, because the bowcaster to me implies that somebody had to make this specifically for Wookiees. Like this was designed for themselves. And maybe another good option is that the big like tripod guns that you see the stormtroopers use, where like they run into an area, they put a tripod down, and then they put a blaster down on top of that, and then they fire it. You could just see a Wookiee just pick that shit up and like haul it around Arnold Schwarzenegger style.
Oh yeah.
As well. They have those big long arms, and you have to imagine that they could probably throw things really well. Like, because they can get just a huge amount of speed by like whipping it around. So you could imagine them using like bolos, or even just like have a really good grenade arsenal, or like things that they could just pull out of their bandolier and hurl at you, because they're going to get you, like they're going to be able to land it right where they want to over a huge distance at great speed.
Yeah, I like that.
Like they don't understand the idea of a grenade launcher because their arms are grenade launchers.
And I mean, like, obviously with their strength, things like melee weapons are going to be like oversized or handcrafted to maximize the use of. And I also like the idea that maybe like there's such a thing as like drop Wookiees.
Oh yeah, where they fall on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Love it. Yeah, this is why like that would be an excellent improvement to the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi, where instead of these little dudes throwing logs at the stormtroopers, you just like one of those little chicken walker ATSTs is walking along, and there's a Wookiee just falls onto the top of it, rips the top of it off because he's super strong, and then just goes in there, and you just see like blood spraying out the top. Because they're horrible they're like incredible predators who could just rip you apart. So this actually makes we were talking a little bit about how they might be one of the first spacefaring species because they were able to do it before the invention of hyperspace. What that says to me is that like rather than being like this little backwater tiny race that like or species, this tiny species that gets like overrun by the galaxy, you know, first the Republic and then the Empire. Like, I like the idea that, no, they were at the core founding of all of this stuff. And like, they are part of the backbone of galactic society because they were the first ones to do it. Like before anybody else got off the ground, the Wookiees had already colonized a bunch of worlds.
Interesting.
I think that's cool.
So one of the things that's touched on with Chewbacca is the idea of the life debt.
Yeah.
There's also mention that like historically Wookiees were often a slave species.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering like if the life debt kind of ties in with that, and if there's anything we can do to like kind of disentangle the two or explore that further. I
always kind of had a headcanon that the life debt thing was just Chewie a little bit, where like he was trying to explain, like, again, this is entirely just me making it up, but I always kind of thought that like that was a thing that Chewbacca had thought up and like felt like he owed Han Solo and like used that as an explanation for why they're like heterosexual life partners, you know, where he's like, this is the easiest way for me to explain how I feel. Like you are my partner. And so like that's what like, but then he tries to explain that to Han Solo, whose mind doesn't work like that. And he's like, oh, he owes me a debt. Okay. That's why he's my friend. And not like, you are my best friend and I love you super much. Like, like it just,
he's like, I'm not getting Wookies Marriage.
Yeah. Like it was like a mistranslation thing and it like didn't really work that way. Because like, I feel like, especially later, like after, you know, basically after A New Hope, like I feel like Chewbacca has totally paid back whatever life debt was given to him. Like he's, the dude has got it fine. Like he could be able to walk away from that with a completely free conscience. But I think he mostly just likes Han and like wants to hang out with him, and also knows that Han would be completely like useless without him. And is like, I need to keep track of this little dude. He's gonna get himself killed.
Yeah.
So maybe I like transforming the idea of the life debt into just, Wookies Married, you called it. Like it's their version of their partnership, which is not necessarily romantic. You know, they pick somebody else and make them part of their family.
Yeah. They're just like, hey, you are useful to have around. I like being around you.
Yeah.
Let's never go apart.
Yeah. And that makes, you could totally imagine that the way their culture works is that after they become adults, like they go off and form like a troop, like they go off and form a new family that is specifically divorced from their bloodlines. Like they go and find new blood. Like this is your like hunter group or something like that. And sometimes if there are members of that same group that are opposite gendered, then you will, you know, like generate some kids out of that. But like mostly it's about like forming a little found family of people that you feel very strongly about. And that it like forms this tight knit little community. And so Chewbacca has like done that with this one dude. Like he's like, oh, okay, Han, you're my troop. And then like Luke and Leia comes on. He's like, okay, I guess we've adopted these children now. And like I could see him just like, this is just an extension of the way that Wookiees work.
Yeah, I do like that. Do you think like on a whole, like Wookiees will be having adopted family outside of other Wookiees, or is that
I like the idea that
a rarity
in the version of the story where they're like one of the dominant species in the universe, where like they were the founding members, is like, I like the idea that they start going out and like they just like they just find people and they're like, okay, you are now a member of my family, and like I don't even care if you really like it or not, but like I have adopted you. You are part of my ship. You are now my child.
I do wonder if there's like like other species like misconstruing that as a form of slavery. Like,
Oh yeah.
like these Wookiees have come and enslaved my race, even though they're just like, no, I'm here to hang out. You're my best bud.
I also love the idea that that something they totally get that humans also do is that they'll take anything and make it a pet. Like that's something that they all like. We'll do that. We'll be like, oh, look at that giant apex predator. I'm going to put it in my house and give it a collar. And like a Wookiee sees that and goes, yes, that is exactly correct. We are definitely doing that. I'm going to have that tiger-sized multi-legged cat as a lap. It's gonna get in my lap and I'm going to scratch it behind the ears. Because I'm also a Wookiee. It doesn't pose any threat to me.
Mm-hmm. And I live long enough that I can oversee the breeding program on this to domesticate it.
Yeah, yes, exactly that. They like go to planets and they're like, that thing could be adorable in about 5 or 10 generations. Okay, let's get started. Yeah, and every time you get to like a Wookiee dominated ship, it's like a menagerie. There's animals everywhere because they keep like every time they land on a planet, they get more of them.
Okay, I love that. I love the idea of like a walking menagerie or like a flying menagerie ship.
Yeah.
And I also like they did it like that's just a thing that like you can expect on a Wookiee ship.
Yeah. So like if you're in the middle of your Star Wars fan fiction or whatever you're talking about, oh, like we need the excretion of a particular kind of snake or something like that. And you're like, oh crap, there's a Wookiee colony like 2 light years that way. They're gonna have one because they always have just tons and tons of animals. And sure enough, this incredibly poisonous snake is just like a little old Wookiee lady's favorite pet, and like she's knitted it a little sweater,
Okay. I love that. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to pull out? Let's look back at our sloth facts and see if we missed anything. They can starve to death on a full snow. Oh my God. That one picture of a sloth. Sloths are cute most of the time, but not all of the time. I'm going to send you this image. Sometimes they look like.
No, I think I'm looking exactly at the one you're talking about. The nightmare creeping zombie sloth.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Well, now I have that up on 2 screens.
Yeah. So I like the idea that they are, let's go back to that. They can grow plants on their fur idea.
Okay. Yeah.
We've already done a little bit of this with some other ideas, but I do like the idea that they can, maybe they go so far as to even like weave things into their fur, like little plants and like, so there are things like, I think orchids technically count as this, where they're called like air plants. They're not really ever meant to be in the ground. Uh-huh. They actually live up in trees and they can get their nutrients and moisture just from the air. And sometimes they're also a little bit parasitic off of the creature or of the plants that they land on. Mm-hmm. But that's entirely the Wookiees' natural environment in this version, where like they're up in the canopy all the time. So you could actually imagine them taking like an orchid and like weaving their hair around its roots so that it like is hanging, it just like lives on their back, because they like the look of it.
I also like the idea that maybe like this behavior started as a sort of a matter of convenience. Like they're like, okay, like sometimes we just need like a little kind of snack or something like that we don't want to spend all our energy on going and hunting. So I'll just start a little farm on my back.
And it also doubles as camouflage then for ambush predator hunting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like they look like giant, they can have a giant ghillie suit basically of all of the things that they have like woven into themselves. That's cool. Yeah, these like walking swamp things sometimes. Like one thing also to remember as you're making things like this is to not make them monolithic. Mm-hmm. There's a temptation to sort of make a species, like all of these guys are basically the way that I am describing it. And it's so easy to fall into the idea of like, well, that makes them all kind of caricatures and makes that entire species boring. So maybe the Wookiees who cover themselves in plants, they still exist, and that's a style that some of them like. But there are other populations that do other things, like they braid their fur, or maybe they even shave sections of themselves or something like that in order to provide different looks.
Oh yeah,
and then you could maybe even see, well, maybe you probably would see some Wookiees who do like a combination of the two. Like they've got dyed fur on their front and they've got plants on their back, and this is just Wookiee fashion. It's like how they sort of identify what culture on that planet they're from.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
one planet to another, since they're so widespread, you'd think there'd be variants over time.
Mm-hmm. I also like the idea that like maybe if, like there's like some holdover from like a hunter-gatherer society where like you'd have like these Wookiees that just have like all these like high nutrient foods. So like not all Wookiees would do it, but like a few of like the farmer type Wookiees would have like these high nutrient foods woven into their
sweet potatoes on their back.
I was thinking like gourds or pumpkins or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Also good.
And just the weird things you could do to kind of like change up the silhouettes of Wookiees.
I love it. They might, if they're also big into like braiding their own hair into patterns and stuff, you can see some people will do wild stuff with that. Like you'll see the like the beard competitions where like a guy will make an entire bird cage out of his beard. So they might actually have like, they might like sew pouches and things or weave pouches that like are directly integrated into their fur as well. Where like they've got pockets built in.
Or they've got a hair baby yarn for whatever animal they're domesticating at this particular moment.
You'd be like, you meet a Wookiee and they're like, you want to see something? You want to see something cool? And you're like, what? And then like they open up a little like a little thing on their chest and there's just a baby bird. And they're like, feed the baby bird some seeds and then they close it.
I thought you were going to go with like the little, like a chest burster kind of thing where you just open up the hair compartment and
or it's that, and they're like, isn't this adorable?
Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
This is much better than the original ones. Especially that awful, I still have the freaking grandpa Chewie's dad or mom or whatever that looks like a sour apple face on my screen. I keep looking at it. And by the way, okay, so you know the Jackolantern idea or the Jackolantern tradition of carving pumpkins. Apparently that was originally done with turnips, and I'm gonna tell you that they look fucking horrifying. This is.
Do you have a link for me, or do I have to go hunting for this myself?
Apropos of nothing, I'm sticking it. I'm gonna make our signal chat even worse.
Oh God, yeah, that's some Dark Souls.
Anyway, okay, I'm gonna minimize that now. Okay, so we also talked a little bit, we mentioned really early on the idea that they get big, they get really big. So we hadn't really mentioned that when we were talking about their ships, but like I would imagine that the corridors in these ships would be, huge. They'd be big enough to put vehicles through. What other changes could happen over the course of their life? They get really big. Maybe do they slow down more? Do they become less capable of being fast as they get older too?
I feel like if they're getting larger, like they're less able to spend time in trees unless the trees are actually able to support the weight.
I think if we're going by the Legends version of Kashyyyk, the trees are like miles high and like hundreds of feet around or something like that. They're stupidly big. Like they're bigger than redwoods. So yeah, we could assume they could still live up in the trees.
Okay.
I like the idea that maybe over time, like just the inclination is the older they get, the more they spend slowed down, because they're bigger and therefore need more calories. And so they sort of like the instinct is to just spend more and more time in that slow stupor, hibernative state. In fact, maybe they don't really die necessarily. Maybe they just eventually just stop. Yeah. They just don't.
They just stop waking up.
And so two Wookiees, like the quote unquote dead, the ones who've like, unless they were murdered and like killed in a violent way, the ones who die of natural causes, they're just still asleep. And like it would be incredibly rude to wake them up. And like, you just don't do that. And so like, you can imagine these like mausoleum trees that have been hollowed out from the inside and they just have these alcoves. They're full of alcoves.
Can I just say, I love that combination of words, mausoleum trees. That just evokes so much cool imagery. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So they've carved these things out and they've got these, they're just full of alcoves that have these huge Wookiees inside of them that haven't moved in centuries. And like nobody's really sure if that actually is true, that like they could wake up if they need to, but like or if they actually are dead, like they are now mummies or something like that. But it's kind of a taboo amongst the Wookiees that like, no, you don't, like, do not disturb the dead. Like they're not really dead, like they're the sleeping or something like that.
I'm also kind of picturing like a third act surprise kind of thing. Like the Wookiees are defending their homeworld and like, all right, well, we need to go, give the giant Wookiees enough nutrients to wake them up to defend their homeland.
No, I got it. I think I got it. We've spent this entire time talking about Star Wars, and there's the Force. So,
as
they get older, when they go into the stupor, they slow themselves down. They become force aware. Like if they're up and around and like moving and stuff, then in their normal like active mode, then they're just a regular creature with no additional force sensitivity. But when they slow down, they become more aware of the force and are able to access force like sensing and things like that. And that allows them to connect with other Wookiees who are also doing the same thing. And so what I'm thinking is as they get older, they get access to something that I would think of, or I would call the dreaming. That would, if I was going to name it, where they are all dreaming together in a shared mind space in the force.
Okay.
And so eventually they get old enough and tired enough and they just go to sleep one day and they go into the dreaming, and that's where they stay like they're just there for the rest of time. And then in the third act, like you're talking about, one of our force sensitive Jedi heroes goes into the Wookiee dreaming, gets all of the tens of thousands of Wookiees who've been asleep there and are still in there, still in the dreaming, and like makes the big impassioned speech about how you need to come out of your stupor to save the galaxy, and wakes them all up.
Okay. I also love the idea of giant 2-story tall Wookiees with lightsabers. So
yes.
Because that's one thing that's always bothered me is like all the races that you kind of see that are sentient generally fall within like between 3 meters tall and like 3 feet tall. There's never any like massive disparities in size.
Yeah, there's a lot of missed opportunities there. At least just once, they managed to get a character who had like 4 arms or 8 arms or something ridiculous like that, which is General Grievous's cyborg body character, who just uses like 4 lightsabers and just spins them around like a freaking windmill. That's like the one time that somebody went like, we could do more with this. But yeah, you can imagine a 4 meter tall, 2-ton Wookiee with a barrel, like a huge ass lightsaber that is like as big around as a man, and it like creates this massive thing that he like sweeps through like an entire battlefield. That'd be freaking cool. Love it. But yeah, no, I definitely like the idea that the way that that humanity treats the Force in Star Wars, which is like a couple of people based on like bloodline have access to this extra special power. I think that's one way you could have that set up. But I like the idea that there are species out there who they get access to it in a different way, and that affects their society in a different way. Like the dreaming in the Wookiees, or maybe it's something like a species that never gets the ability to like telekinetically like move things. Like they can't like reach their hand out and have a lightsaber come to them. But like almost the entire species gets access to some of the sensing abilities. So like it's super common for them to like feel the Force and like be able to perceive the world around them through it, but they never get the ability to like manipulate the Force in the way that others do.
So what's a darkseid Wookiee look like?
Ooh, so darkseid tends to give you yellow and red eyes. So you'd see those big bloodshot, gross looking eyes. I think the hair all falls out. Like, I think they end up looking like one of them Sphinx cats, with like, or like a creature with mange.
I feel like that zombie sloth picture you just sent me.
Yeah.
That's a great way to go with
it. They have those, and they have these huge claws. Maybe they keep them out all of the time instead of attracting them. Yeah, that's cool. I also like give them different dark force powers. Like instead of the force lightning, give them like the ability to like do a Wookiee yell that like works like a Skyrim dragon shout, where like it sends out a force when they scream. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be a really cool, very impressive on-screen dynamic there.
Yeah. Almost every solution or every problem in Star Wars could be solved by being a little bit more creative instead of just doing the thing that you already did 4 movies ago again.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't need another planet-destroying super weapon that's even bigger this time. Oh God. Anyway, as much as I love Star Wars, the last 10 years have killed the Star Wars fan in me. Like I'm still a fan of parts of it, but like the part of me that like loved everything unabashedly is gone now. I
feel like they got a little bit back for me with The Mandalorian. Like,
so how I feel now is I'm a fan of The Mandalorian, and I'm a fan of the original trilogy, and I'm a fan of, various other things. I'm a fan of the X-Wing games, but I'm not a fan of Star Wars anymore. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, The Mandalorian did good. I love they've been doing a really good job of expanding that universe in a way that makes sense. Like just to praise Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni a little bit, like the addition of things like sort of like aspects of everyday life that show up in The Mandalorian is really nice, where it's like a much more ground level, like things are just kind of happening in this universe. Admittedly, I've only seen season 1, but like, like you see restaurants and things like where people show up and they're just like, hey, you want some soup? And he's like, yeah, I want some soup. And like, that's nice. I just like having that kind of stuff show up.
I didn't realize it, but yeah, I actually really enjoy getting that kind of slice of lifestyle look into the Star Wars universe that you really didn't get with any of the movies. They're all very space opera.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Star Wars movies are like the grandest thing that could happen in that universe at any particular time. It's always like the most important bit. And I'm always much more interested in the like just everyday dudes experience a little bit more. Like that's more interesting. I'm going to speak this into the world because I still think it would be cool, which is a 10 episode miniseries or show that is the Rebel versus Empire war told in the style of Band of Brothers.
Oh, interesting.
Where it's just like, it's just a unit of people. Like you follow a particular rebel cell as they go through like starting the rebellion and then like fighting, and you have people die and like tragedies happen and like on the ground fighting. And like, maybe you have like an episode where you follow some starfighter pilots or something like that. And like, just tell like no force stuff, no, like never show us anything that we ever recognize basically. Like maybe every once in a while show us like, oh, we'll see the back of Admiral Akbar's head or something like that. Like that's like as little relation to the rest of the story as I want. I just want it to be like,
oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
I feel like they kind of went that direction a little bit with Rogue One.
Yes. Oh, and which is why Rogue One is amazing. Like I love Rogue One to death because it showed us a whole big different section of that universe and just like dug deep into it and managed to fix problems that existed in the original narrative by like making them now like, okay, so the question of how did the Death Star plans get into the hands of the rebels is one that's never really addressed very concretely in Star Wars New Hope. And now when you see that, the story and the sacrifice that was taken to get those hands into Leia's hands at the beginning, get those plans into Leia's hands at the beginning of A New Hope, like it has a bigger emotional impact now. Like it actually improved a movie that came out 30 years before its creation. And that's so cool.
And we also get one of the coolest shots of Darth Vader doing his thing.
Oh, it turns him into such a drama queen. Like he turned off his chest unit, which has lights on it, just so that he could make a dramatic entrance. That dude is extra. I also like that it changes. There's an interaction in A New Hope where like Darth Vader's like, you're a member of the Rebel Alliance and you've got the Death Star plans and I'm looking for him. And Leia, who literally just came from that battle 5 minutes ago and who knows she's SARS, like, I don't know what the you're talking about, asshole. And it's like, it completely changes that dynamic. It's not plausible at all. It's just defiant Bill. I love it. Okay, I feel like we have to circle back to Wookiees for at least a second before we're done, instead of just talking about Star Wars in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do like the idea of darkseid Wookiees.
Yes, so. For sure. And I think also like giving a race like that the freedom to be evil is important.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but I'm afraid there is an evil Wookiee, I think in the KOTOR series, who shows up for a while. And I remember when I played that game being like, oh yeah, an evil Wookiee. Like he's like an asshole. I like that. Like, thank God. Like they're not all just variations on Chewie. Like they all have, they actually end up with their own desires and like are allowed to be realized people, which is really important. So yeah, for sure. Darkseid Wookiees. Hell yes. Yeah. I also like the idea of making them more of a backbone race, make them present in the universe because they happened to be first would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we are out. Bye.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. This is the time of the episode where I tell you to go to Podchaser or iTunes and leave us a 5-star review to help other people find our podcast. Also, I have gotten myself wrapped up in another podcast project called Breathing Space Fading Frontiers, an anthology sci-fi audio drama, which I've done a bunch of writing for.
If you're listening to this episode the week it came out, then there is still time to head over to the Breathing Space Twitter and to check out the open casting call. We're looking for people to perform in the first half of our season. There'll be another one later, but look for a link in the description for that. And other than that, now for the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a Do What the F You Want public license.